It was a blood-red invitation card, so vivid and intense it almost looked wet, as if it had been dipped in fresh scarlet ink. Even at a glance, the thing radiated drama and absurd seriousness, making it impossible to mistake for anything ordinary. To the esteemed entity from the abyss of darkness, we humbly request the honor of raiding the deepest labyrinth by your side. Sincerely, Fabian Zalong. The moment Lee Hoyle finished reading it, he crushed the card in his fist. Tears spilled from his eyes in pure, unbearable agony, like his soul had taken direct damage. Why is the whole world using that cringe nickname now? He groaned inwardly, nearly losing his mind. He immediately blamed the dark spirit. You big-mouthed little demon. But the spirit only stood there wearing a fake look of innocence, as if none of this was its fault. Even so, the situation itself was no joke. The Explorers Alliance was basically the brain of Arcana, a gathering of fearless specialists whose presence could massively boost the success rate of any Rift raid. These people were the absolute elite, the kind of experts everyone talked about in awe. They weren't just good. They were the central pillars of any high-tier raid team, the sort of monsters who could change the outcome of an operation just by showing up. But for most low-level squads, legends like them existed in another world entirely. Hiring people of that caliber wasn't even a dream, it was pure fantasy. Why they had suddenly stepped forward like this remained a mystery no one could easily explain. Locke let out a short scoff and tossed out a wild guess. They're famous for charging insane service fees, right? That's the catch, isn't it? Camilla said, shaking her head with a doubtful look. Those guys care about hard numbers and efficiency more than anything. And their roster is packed with complete monsters. Her tone made it clear she didn't trust generosity that came this easily. The moment she saw Fabian Zalong's eyes gleaming with that suspiciously eager enthusiasm, a chill ran down her spine. Something about it felt completely off. Since when did high-rankers volunteer their help for free, especially on a job this dangerous and this high-profile? Meanwhile, Weaver scratched his head, openly confused by the whole thing. This is totally different from how they treated us, he muttered, still trying to make sense of the gap in treatment. Even while anchoring the show and keeping one eye on the broadcast screen, Weaver couldn't hide how stunned he was by the blatant double standard. So even the mighty Explorers Alliance has to bow their heads now, he thought. They're really lowering themselves for Lee Hoyle, the man who's shaking the whole world upside down. But Fabian Zalong had a very different plan brewing behind that polished smile of his. From the outside, the Explorers Alliance offering their services for free made them look generous, noble, even reformed. Anyone watching from afar might have thought they had suddenly turned over a new leaf. But there was always a hidden agenda behind a free meal. Labyrinths were the Explorers Alliance's natural territory, the stage where they were supposed to shine brightest. This was the perfect chance to rebuild their damaged reputation, especially after being overshadowed by the Mage Tower and the Knights. They needed a win, and they knew it. We can't let another faction steal this golden opportunity, Fabian Zalong whispered to himself as he stared at Lee Hoyle's image, his smile never slipping. We're going to squeeze every last drop out of your popularity. The thought was shameless, calculated, and brutally practical, which made it fit the situation perfectly. Standing beside Fabian were Lone and Aaron, both wearing bright, polished smiles that looked perfectly camera-ready. But those expressions were only surface level. Behind them, their minds were already racing through their own private calculations and ambitions. This is my chance to build my own legend. Time to prove I'm one step ahead of him. The next guild master should be me. Those kinds of thoughts churned beneath their calm expressions. In front of the flashing cameras, the team looked warm and cooperative, but on the inside, they were practically drooling over the fame and influence this operation could bring them. Meanwhile, back at the Mage Tower, inside Lee Hoyle's personal lab, the atmosphere was completely different. Granfell Claude Arpius Romeo sat with cold, unreadable eyes as he reviewed the proposal in silence, giving the document all the warmth of a winter blade. Objective unclear. The verdict was short, flat, and merciless, delivered without even the slightest hint of hesitation. Rejected. The moment those words landed, Lee Hoyle's face turned gray. He puffed out his cheeks in a miserable pout, looking less like a powerful figure and more like a child who had just been denied the one thing he desperately wanted. Then he completely lost it. He started yelling at once, flailing so dramatically he looked like he might actually roll across the floor in full tantrum mode if that was what it took to win the argument. Are you out of your mind? You're planning to solo a demon labyrinth? Even if we throw everything we have into this, it still might not be enough. You should be grateful they're willing to come along. Lee Hoyle's desperate outburst was so raw and pathetic that even Granfell Claudie Arpius Romeo paused for the briefest second. His eyes drifted to the photo of Fabian Zalong giving a thumbs up with that dazzling public smile, and the room went quiet for a beat. Granfell let out a low, heavy sigh. Their pride as explorers does not seem false, he said at last. Perhaps they deserve a chance to fight for this world. Hearing that, Lee Hoyle sagged in place and released a huge breath of relief, like he had barely escaped disaster. But even as he relaxed, Granfell noticed something strange about the situation. Just like the Demon Castle rifts that changed depending on the state of the world, these updates were clearly not random chance or simple RNG. The Tepus Labyrinth would eventually obey that same law of causality. Based on his prediction, this was more than a raid. It was an opportunity, a path to uncover new data. A spirit born from darkness had reacted to black magic. That fact alone meant something deeper was hiding beneath the surface. I may even learn more about Granfell's own dark affinity through this, he thought. That possibility tipped the scales. With that conclusion settled in his mind, Granfell Claudie Arpius Romeo calmly picked up the paper and signed it. I accept. His voice was grim and firm, carrying the finality of a judgment that would not be undone. The appointed time came quickly. The very next day, beneath a scorching desert sun, a convoy rolled across the wasteland. It arrived loaded with modern equipment, drones, supply crates, and heavy vehicles, everything needed to document and survive an operation of this scale. They set up camp in a hurry, preparing to film what many were already calling the event of the century. The desert heat was brutal, dry enough to make the air itself feel sharp, but not even the savage climate could put out the director's burning curiosity. I heard the guild master is coming in person. Is he really here? Someone whispered. And look at that strange artifact he's holding. Not long after, Fabian Zalong, Lomed, and Aaron stepped onto the scene fully equipped and battle-ready, each of them carrying the confident air of people used to standing at the top. The cameraman looked at the trio with visible hesitation, his hands trembling slightly around the equipment. I get why the guild master being here is a big deal, he said nervously. But are those other two really that scary? Will I get second-hand clout just by filming them? He added half-jokingly. The director, a seasoned veteran of the industry, immediately shook his head and shot back. Are you kidding? You seriously don't know? Those three are monsters. He pointed them out one by one. Aaron is a top executive of the Explorers Alliance, an absolute beast. And Lomed? He's second in command. Then he leaned closer and lowered his voice. Last year, European guilds hired both of them at the same time and almost went bankrupt. Their fees are outrageous, and their efficiency is the best in the guild. They're the elite of the elite. The cameraman stared in disbelief. And now those legends were personally approaching Lee Hoyle. They're here, the director barked, snapping him back to reality. Stick to them like glue. Record every whisper. The cameraman hurried off at once, leaving the director to turn his attention toward Granfell Claudie Arpius Romeo. So you're the one. Fabian Zalong stepped forward first, extending a hand with polished, practiced goodwill. It's an honor, Mr. Lee Hoyle. I am the guild master of the Explorers Alliance. His smile was warm, but every inch of him felt carefully measured. But Granfell Claudie Arpius Romeo cut him off without a trace of warmth. There is no time for pleasantries. His voice was cold enough to kill the mood in an instant. Then he went straight for the heart of it. Show me your pride. Prove that you are worth my time. The contrast was ridiculous. While Granfell stood there like a cold-blooded ruler, poor Lee Hoyle inside was practically melting from the desert heat, sniffling and suffering. It's so hot. Can we just move already? Fabian Zalong, meanwhile, froze for a moment, clearly stunned by how abruptly Granfell had shut him down. Inside, Fabian quietly confirmed every rumor he had heard. That gaze, he's completely in control. The pressure Granfell gave off wasn't an act, and it wasn't exaggeration either. The man's terrifying reputation was the real thing. At last, The group began their descent into the abyss-like depths of the labyrinth. The system displayed the recommended level in stark, unforgiving numbers. Deepest Labyrinth, recommended level 500 to 777. This was exactly the kind of insane death march you only saw in the most brutal hardcore leveling games. Even the atmosphere inside felt wrong, heavy, and unnatural. Grandfell Claudie Arpius Romeo took point without hesitation, and the guild members followed close behind in tense silence. Meanwhile, the real Lee Hoyle inside was shrinking behind Grandfell, glancing around with nervous awe. So this is the deepest labyrinth, one of the 10 great mysteries, but isn't it kind of empty? Just then, a voice called from behind. Mr. Lee Hoyle, please be careful. The warning came out tense and urgent. From that point onward, traps could be hidden anywhere, and everyone knew sudden ambushes were possible. But before the speaker could finish, there was a sharp click beneath someone's foot. A trap had been triggered. A red system warning burst into view before their eyes, flashing so violently it painted the corridor in danger. Then a voice rang out, cold enough to make even hell seem warm by comparison. Foolish mortals who dare step into the deepest labyrinth. There is no glory or treasure here. The warning crashed over them like a wave of ice. If you wish to live, leave this place immediately. Lee Hoyle broke into a cold sweat at once. Did I just trigger a boss flag? Grandfell heard it too, and he stopped dead in his tracks. The silence that followed was so tight and suffocating it felt hard to breathe. Behind him, Fabian Zalong forced himself to stay optimistic. It's probably just a standard warning message for intruders, he said, trying to keep the tension under control. Aaron nodded beside him, agreeing without much hesitation. Nothing's happening, Aaron said after a moment. Lee Hoyle's face, which had gone completely pale, finally regained a tiny bit of color as the immediate panic eased. Oh God, you scared me. I seriously thought we broke the dungeon, Lee Hoyle muttered inwardly, barely holding himself together. Fabian then turned to Grandfell and suggested, we should begin scanning this entire sector immediately. Grandfell answered at once, without wasting a second. Leave it to me. Outwardly, his response was calm and absolute. But inside, Grandfell Claudie Arpius Romeo was already dissecting the strange sensation he had felt a few moments earlier. There was energy pulsing behind that wall. Faint, hidden, but undeniably there. 1 hour later, the exploration team had managed to identify and mark every trap within the sector, but the oppressive feeling in the labyrinth had only grown heavier. Lomd reported the results with a stiff expression. Trap neutralization complete. Even his voice carried strain now, as if the maze itself had started getting under his skin. But these traps are no joke, he added grimly. The difficulty is insane. If the entire labyrinth was built like this, then the scale of the problem was far worse than they had expected. Hearing it laid out so clearly, Fabian felt a sharp spike of anxiety twist in his chest. At this rate, our disarming speed won't be able to keep up with the rift's collapse rate, Fabian realized. But that wasn't even the most terrifying part. A much worse thought suddenly struck him, and the color in his expression changed. He turned toward Grandfell Claudie Arpius Romeo, speaking more cautiously now. Mr. Lee Hoyle, most dungeons are built with an exit mechanism for raiders. We explorers are usually the ones who find shortcuts and secure the treasure. He paused, studying the maze around them with growing dread. But this place, it looks like they didn't even design an exit. He hesitated, then finally voiced the fear he had been holding back since the warning appeared. It looks like that warning might have been real. His throat felt dry as he said it. This isn't a dungeon made to protect treasure. It's a death trap. And just like that, the whole situation twisted into the kind of brutal cliffhanger that always made the worst possible possibilities feel real. Fabian Zalong's resolve was starting to crack. We could keep pushing forward while disarming traps, he said, trying to stay rational. But the time cost is too high. And we have no idea what kind of nightmare is waiting at the end. The question hung heavily in the air. What exactly was this labyrinth hiding? He looked to Grandfell Claudie Arpius Romeo for an answer, but the man did not even bother to respond. Instead of answering with words, Lee Hoyle calmly called forth his own forces. At his summons, the dark spirit Hien Casset rose from the void in an instant, appearing as though the darkness itself had gathered together and taken form before them. I have awaited your summons, my liege, my master. I have yearned for this moment for what feels like an eternity. She lowered herself into a deep bow, her voice quivering with reverence and devotion. O cursed power, source of ruin and despair, your very presence alone inspires terror. Every word came out like a sacred hymn offered to a being she regarded with absolute awe. At the sight of that unbelievable scene, Fabian Zalong could do nothing but stare with wide, astonished eyes. Even for someone as experienced as him, the sheer weight of the spirit's presence and the way it addressed Li Hoyle felt far beyond ordinary understanding. Is that a legendary spirit? Fabian wondered in disbelief. And was that chant just now some kind of buff? Hearing that, Li Hoyle died a little on the inside. I wish it were just a buff, he thought bitterly, cringing so hard it hurt. But Granfell Claudi Arpius Romeo showed no reaction at all. He simply gave a cold, unshakable order. Dark spirit, recount the history of Tepus. The entity obeyed without the slightest delay. I have long awaited your question, she replied. Long ago, the citizens of the ancient city of Tepus sacrificed their very souls for the sake of Arcana. Then, without warning, a violent disturbance rippled across the perimeter. The air tightened, and that same bone-chilling voice echoed through the maze once again, heavy with menace. Foolish mortals who dare enter the maze of Tepus. There is no glory or treasure here. If you value your pathetic lives, flee this place at once. The warning rang out with enough pressure to make even seasoned players tense up. Panic began spreading through the raid party. Did you hear that? Someone shouted. I've never seen a dungeon give off this kind of pressure before. At the same time, the comment section exploded into confusion and fear. What was that? My spine is tingling. Oh my god, we didn't hear anything on our end, but the other Y-Gang members said it triggered the moment they entered. Is it a curse or some hidden clue? Am I the only one thinking this? Wait, where did Li Hoyle go? Where is he? The confusion spiraled out of control until Y-Gang quickly spoke up. Let me explain. He pulled out a rough sketch and began showing it to the viewers. It was clearly a different structure from a normal rift. In this labyrinth, everyone starts from a different coordinate, he explained, trying to keep his voice steady. So for now, please understand that we can't broadcast Li Hoyle's point of view because the party has been separated. The viewers were unexpectedly impressed. Wow, Y-Gang actually sounds like a real explorer now. This is exactly like the hidden mechanics in a classic leveling story. He continued, his voice growing more excited as he went. Even though the starting points are different, every path eventually converges at one final destination. I'll do my absolute best to capture Li Hoyle Nim's performance, Y-Gang promised. The livestream chat immediately filled with messages cheering him on. Good luck. But then someone noticed something odd. Fanboy Y-Gang, are you nervous? Your hands are shaking like crazy. Hey, why is the screen vibrating? Y-Gang looked confused. My hands aren't shaking, he insisted. But the tremors on screen were impossible to deny. The viewers refused to let it go. Yeah, right. You're definitely scared. I don't buy it. You've been exposed as a coward. But when Y-Gang looked around carefully, he realized the truth at the same time they did. It wasn't his hands trembling. The entire labyrinth was shaking violently around him. I'm serious, he said, his voice rising. The maze itself is moving. And then, with a deafening crack, part of the massive wall burst open and left behind a huge, jagged hole. Panic erupted instantly. What the hell is happening? Someone screamed. From that dark opening, thousands of monsters came pouring out in a wave so thick it looked like death itself had taken shape. They surged forward like a living flood, swallowing the space between them and the players in seconds. The raid team scattered in terror, every bit of order breaking apart at once. The moment one of the monsters appeared clearly on screen, the livestream chat exploded in alarm. Run! Oh my god! Y-Gang is dead for sure. Oh my god! Y-Gang, run! The viewers screamed through the chat, but he was already too late. In the blink of an eye, one of the beasts lunged forward and snatched him up before he could properly react. Leave this place. We do not kill. We only repel. If you do not wish to die, be gone. The words rang out with eerie restraint, and outside the maze, the rest of the world still had no idea what was truly happening deep within Tepus. But according to the buried history of this place, A calamity had once appeared on a day without warning. It did not announce itself with fanfare or prophecy. It simply arrived, and the world's fate changed from that moment on. That ancient disaster advanced toward a frozen maiden with savage inevitability. Its body was so vast it blotted out the sun itself, casting everything beneath it into shadow. Its obsidian flesh radiated such overwhelming terror that it felt as though the fear could freeze the marrow inside a person's bones. The fruit in the maiden's trembling hands slipped free and fell to the ground. In that instant, instinct screamed the same truth to everyone who witnessed it. If that creature ever fully awakened, the entire continent would be doomed to complete annihilation. Humanity gathered together to oppose it. Desperate councils were convened, and voices filled with dread argued through sleepless nights. We cannot allow it to escape Tepes and spread across the land, they said, knowing full well that failure meant the end of everything. Is there truly only one way left to save the world? In the end, they chose the cruelest answer imaginable. They sacrificed the flesh and blood of every citizen in Tepes and used forbidden black magic to seal the creature into an endless sleep, turning it into the unawakened one. Now, in the dark, thousands of trapped souls cried out in agony. Let me out. It hurts. I can't endure this anymore. Someone, please save me. And if I can't be saved, then please just kill me. Please end this suffering. Hearing those voices, Lee Hoyle finally understood the grotesque truth in full. The people of this place had not simply died. They had been transformed into living sacrifices for black magic and bound to that horror without release. The sheer cruelty of it hit him like a blow to the chest. He was left speechless for a moment, shaken by the weight of what had happened there. So this is the true history of Tepes. No wonder this place had twisted into such a warped and mysterious labyrinth. The suffering soaked into its foundation explained everything. Then Lee Hoyle's voice cut through the despair, firm and clear against the chorus of anguish. I have heard your plea, he declared. I will be the one to bring this tragedy to an end. The creature that must never awaken, the source of all this ruin, would be dealt with by his own hands. He had made up his mind to erase the root of the nightmare himself. At that exact moment, the system chimed sharply in response. Quest: defeat the unawakened forms slumbering in the abyss. The notification appeared with an undeniable sense of finality, as if the labyrinth itself had acknowledged his resolve. Status: in progress. Outside the immediate center of it all, Fabian Zalong and Lone were visibly flustered as they rushed to stop him, both of them alarmed by how naturally he had decided to charge straight toward the heart of the disaster. Are you seriously planning to run straight into the maze? They shouted. That's suicide. Then, in the middle of the chaos, Lone suddenly spotted something and snapped his head to the side. Wait, look over there. They turned as one and saw a horde of beasts charging directly toward them. The monsters are swarming, someone yelled. But these were not mere beasts. They were victims, bodies that had been stolen and corrupted by the Dark Covenant. Just as the horde closed in and one hand stretched out through the darkness, a majestic purple aura burst outward and formed an unbreakable barrier against the oncoming tide. That wave of power pierced through every single monster in its path, not like a simple attack, but like a call reaching into their very souls. The energy spread through them all at once, carrying a voice that resonated deep inside their ruined bodies. O citizens of Tepes, the moment that voice touched them, something changed. The beasts, those broken creatures who had lost themselves long ago, began to weep. Tears fell from monstrous eyes, as if a forgotten piece of their humanity had finally been reached. Their twisted forms seemed to waver, as though the monsters they had become were peeling away for just a moment to reveal the people hidden underneath. Then desperate cries burst forth all at once. Save me. I just want this to end. The pleas were raw, pained, and heartbreakingly human. Cutting through that chaos came a voice carrying absolute authority. Please save us. I understand your pain, Granfell Claudi Arpius Romeo declared without hesitation. Darkness is always bound by a darkness even deeper than itself. A labyrinth built on black arts is no exception. Watching that overwhelming power unfold, Fabian Zalong felt a cold shiver of anxiety run through him. This vibration, Lone muttered as he frantically checked the seismic monitor. The entire labyrinth, it's reacting to him. The realization made the tension rise even further. And Lee Hoyle, the one now standing at the center of that terrifying force, spoke again with icy certainty. I shall carry on your pride. The words landed with the weight of a vow. It was as if the beasts had finally found someone worthy of their obedience, someone strong enough to bear the burden they could no longer carry themselves. Then he turned his back to them and issued his command to the creatures he had just subdued. Lead the way, O lions of Tepus. His decree rang out like an order from a king, and the corrupted beings responded as though they had been waiting all this time for someone to speak those words. The system flashed a fresh notification before his eyes. You have obtained command authority over the Dark Covenant bearers of Tepus. Elsewhere in the labyrinth, ordinary players were still fighting desperately just to stay alive against the overwhelming tide of monsters. If you want to live, get out of here, someone shouted. What are those monsters even saying? Wait, is Wygang about to die? Those are level 450 elites. The panic only kept growing as the danger closed in from every side. Wygang, can you even survive difficulty like this? The viewers cried. Cornered and helpless, Wygang had already started sobbing uncontrollably. He managed to choke out. Then suddenly, a flash of steel cut through the air. The monster in front of him was sliced cleanly in two, dropping apart before his eyes and leaving Wygang completely stunned. It had happened so fast his brain could barely keep up. Something unbelievable had just saved him at the last possible second. A warrior emerged from the chaos like a hero descending into a disaster zone. His arrival was so sudden and precise it felt almost unreal. You're the streamer filming this raid, correct? He asked, his tone calm even in the middle of the mayhem. You should be more careful. Wygang's mind was still lagging behind from the shock, and all he could manage was a slow, awkward, hitch thank you. By the time the stranger moved on, the young man hurriedly looked around the area, trying to understand what had just happened. For a brief moment, the monster horde had stopped moving. Wygang wondered if he was imagining it. Then one beast slowly turned its head in a specific direction, leaving Nam Keelman utterly baffled. In the next second, every single monster shifted its gaze the same way. Only then did he notice that something strange was happening. Their bloodlust had disappeared almost completely. The killing intent that had filled the air only moments ago was suddenly gone, replaced by something far more unsettling. While he stood there still confused about where they were all heading, Wygang realized the truth. There was only one man who could turn a battlefield around like this without even showing his full hand. Tears of relief and admiration streamed down Wygang's face as he praised his idol with unfiltered emotion. It's Lee Hoyle. This has to be part of some hidden quest route. If we follow those beasts, we might reach the core of the dungeon. The moment that name was spoken, curiosity flared on every side. Excitement spread through the soldiers and the spectators alike at the thought of Lee Hoyle being at the center of all this once again. For many of them, just surviving until the labyrinth was cleared would have already been profitable enough. But now they were being handed something far better, a free route straight into the abyss itself. That kind of opportunity felt almost unreal. Just imagine the insane experience points waiting at the bottom. This is perfect viral content, like a live-action leveling recap. I love you, Lee Hoyle man. As people scrambled to chase the unfolding spectacle, the silent warrior who had stepped in earlier only let out a faint smirk. I'm going in first. With that, they began descending deeper into the labyrinth. Even without any ruined scenery in front of them, the atmosphere was so charged that it felt like the air itself was vibrating with anticipation. It felt like something enormous and unforgettable was about to emerge at any moment. The streamer took the lead with nervous excitement, his eyes darting all over the place. If luck stayed on his side, maybe he could ride this quest all the way to the end. But then, in the middle of that excitement, terror suddenly seized him. He collapsed on the spot, his whole body trembling as he raised one shaking finger toward the darkness ahead. I'll look over there, he whispered, barely able to force the words out. The soldier beside him followed that trembling finger and turned his head toward the same shadowed direction. The moment he saw what was waiting there, all the color drained from his face, leaving him as pale as a corpse. The moment they saw that thing staring back at them, both of them stopped dead in their tracks. Their bodies locked up before their minds could even catch up, because what hung in the darkness ahead was a colossal eye so enormous and unnatural that it instantly crushed any thought of moving forward. "No, is that really an eye?" the soldier whispered, his voice thin and shaky. He kept staring, completely frozen between fear and disbelief, as if his brain refused to accept what his own eyes were showing him. "What the hell is that?" he blurted out at last. "If that's only the eyeball, then how huge is the rest of the body?" The question spilled out in pure horror, because the answer was already too terrifying to imagine. The girl standing beside him hurriedly fumbled for her device and checked for a system update with trembling hands. The information that flashed across the screen made her face drain of color, and the fear that spread through the group became impossible to hide. "A level 900 boss? Are you kidding me? I never should have come here." Panic exploded on the spot. The streamer grabbed Gang by the collar, his voice breaking under the pressure as the whole situation spiraled out of control. "Hey, is this really part of Lee Hoyle's quest? What if those monsters turn around and slaughter us right now?" Even while fear clawed at his throat, he tried desperately to make sense of what he was seeing. "Wait, look closely," he said, pointing toward the sea of monsters, all moving in the exact same direction. The beasts were gathering from every corner of the labyrinth without exception. It was as if they had all been seized by the same invisible will. Their footsteps landed in perfect rhythm, heavy and synchronized, like an army marching under a single command rather than a mob of mindless creatures. Then, as one, they stopped in front of a single man who was casually sipping tea as though none of this chaos concerned him at all. The horde arranged itself into neat, disciplined ranks, a formation so orderly it only made the scene feel even more surreal. It was Lee Hoyle. There was no mistaking him. Even surrounded by monsters and the pressure of death, he sat there with the same impossible calm. Cheers broke out almost instantly. "Lee Hoyle, it's really him." Desperate people clung to that sight like it was the last rope hanging over an abyss, and for the first time since the nightmare began, hope came rushing back into their faces. "Just like we thought. Lee Hoyle is controlling the horde. We're saved." That was what everyone believed. On the outside, Lee Hoyle calmly lifted his hot tea and took another measured sip. But inside, his soul was in full meltdown. "We are absolutely, catastrophically doomed." The thought of actually fighting that thing made terror crawl straight into his bones. This was not some ordinary demon-type enemy he could bluff his way through or overpower with a clean advantage. The pressure coming off it felt fundamentally wrong. "How does something like that even have a level 900 tag?" he screamed internally. "I barely managed to beat level 850 Floros, and that was with a natural enemy buff carrying the whole fight." Inside, Lee Hoyle's spirit was shaking like a leaf in a storm. "This isn't some average leveling game where I can chug a few doping potions and charge in like an idiot." Meanwhile, Fabian Zalong had already moved ahead to scout the situation. "For now it seems dormant, but these signs," he muttered grimly. Lee Hoyle, still trembling inside, kept studying the monstrous scale, texture, and presence of the beast in front of him. "No, wait," he thought desperately. "With this many players, if we all attack together," then a voice cut through his frantic calculations. "It looks exactly like a real dragon." The instant that realization settled in, Lee Hoyle felt sick enough to throw up on the spot. "A dragon," Fabian Zalong said out loud, his voice low and grim. He didn't sound uncertain anymore. He sounded like a man who had just confirmed the worst possible answer. "Dragons are beings even the tower's mages avoid provoking. They are the apex predators of Arcana." Fabian turned sharply toward Lee Hoyle, his urgency plain now. "We have to retreat immediately. There is no room for hesitation here." And yet Lee Hoyle outwardly remained perfectly composed, his face unreadable beneath the grand fell Claudi Arpius Romeo persona. "Mr. Fabian," he said with calm authority, "your fears are unfounded." Not a single crack showed on the surface. At the same time, he checked the system window again. Top 10 Mysteries of Tipus's Maze. The title hovered there like a reminder that this place still belonged to a quest structure, no matter how insane the situation looked. One of the great enigmas of Arcana. Decipher the maze and reveal the truth of Tipus to the world. Mysteries solved. 0 out of 10. Witness the completion of Tipus's Maze, complete. Enter the deepest level. In progress. Defeat the unawakened entity sleeping at the bottom. In progress. His thoughts raced. Dragons were central figures in Arcana's main lore, the kind of existence tied to the world's core narrative. But Tipas's maze was supposed to be a standard quest route. That meant one thing. However terrifying it looked, this was not the real deal. Lee Hoyle spoke with absolute calm. That is not the true dragon, Immersive. And as he narrowed his eyes and looked more carefully, he caught something else hidden nearby. Another unwelcome presence had entered what was now effectively his territory. There is a demon somewhere nearby. The system reacted at once. Natural enemy skill activated. The notification appeared so cleanly that it almost felt like fate had handed him a weapon at the perfect moment. A whole storm of thoughts flashed through his mind in an instant. The fear, the absurdity, the sudden opportunity. Everything collided at once as he pieced together what that notification really meant. A demon is hiding among the players inside this rift? Unbelievable. Then a grin almost rose inside him despite the chaos. But thanks for that. I got a power buff before the fight even started. Fantastic. A free bonus. Seriously, thanks. I got ridiculously lucky. While everyone else stood there frozen in fear, a deep, dark aura began to spread from him in quiet, suffocating waves. It's not your turn yet, so shut up and wait. The words came out cold and dismissive, aimed at the hidden demon without anyone else understanding. When had he even stood up from his seat? No one could say. But now his stride carried an arrogant confidence that made it feel as though the battlefield itself belonged to him. Now behold the successor to Tipas's pride. As he approached that giant eye, he raised his voice and called out, "Oh, unawakened entity." And with that provocation, Immersive truly began to wake. Its mouth split open, revealing a terrifying abyss that looked less like flesh and more like a hole leading straight into destruction itself. Come on, Lee Hoyle thought grimly. Go ahead and destroy everything to your heart's content. The scale of the horror finally started moving in earnest. Fear status effect applied to the unawakened entity. Then several more negative status effects stacked on top of it in quick succession. The two soldiers watching had never seen a creature like this in their lives, and as the monstrous body stirred, pure panic took over their faces. What is that? Why is it moving all of a sudden? They shouted, unable to hold back the terror in their voices. The sight of such a massive being actually coming to life was enough to shatter whatever courage they had left. Lee Hoyle focused on the system interface with narrowed eyes. Status, standing by, 10,890 contractors of Dark Tipas. Then he looked toward the gathered monsters, almost as if he were politely consulting them before the next move. You guys want to fight too? He asked. Inside, he was honestly delighted. Because I can't fully control all of you, and I definitely don't have the mana to micromanage this many bodies anyway. So honestly, do whatever you want. But of course, what came out of his mouth was far cooler and far more commanding than what he was really thinking. He lifted his gaze like a ruler, giving permission to an army. Fight as you wish. The order landed, and the horde responded at once. The monsters surged forward in a violent wave, throwing themselves at Immersive as if they had been waiting for permission to tear the thing apart. Even the citizens of Tipas and the players got swept into the fray, joining the chaotic assault. But the moment the front lines collided, some of the monsters were crushed instantly beneath the sheer weight and violence of the dragon-like creature's movements. The system updated without emotion. Status, standing by, 9,754 contractors remaining. Even in the middle of battle, the number falling so quickly was enough to make the scale of the sacrifice feel brutally real. Immersive exhaled a devastating breath that ripped through the battlefield like a natural disaster. The system updated the losses again, cold and merciless, as the surviving forces were thinned by that single attack. Status, standing by, 7,551 remaining. The army was shrinking fast. Status, standing by, 5,321 remaining. Screams tore through the air from every direction. The monsters are attacking the boss, the soldiers shouted in disbelief, and while they watched the chaos unfold, they started arguing over what they were supposed to do next. Why are they fighting each other? Does it matter? We have to join this fight no matter what. But how do you stop something that crushes the earth just by moving? As they stared at the destruction, someone suddenly remembered something from an earlier broadcast. Wait, I recognize that magic circle from the livestream. It's the exact same divine spell Hyen Cassett unleashed during the Yusra Island raid. The recognition sent another wave of shock through the group, because it meant this chaos was not random at all. It was connected to power they had already witnessed once before. Amid all that madness, only Lee Hoyle stood unmoving, as steady as a mountain in the middle of a storm. An invisible, suffocating pressure rolled off him while everything else shook, and then he gave his next command with chilling clarity. If any of you still possess even a shred of pride in your souls, then raise your weapons. His voice was not loud, but it struck harder than a shout. It carried weight, judgment, and expectation all at once. Those words hit the frozen players straight in the heart. Shame and resolve pierced them like arrows, dragging them out of paralysis and forcing their bodies back into motion. Hesitation gave way to action. Roars of determination erupted from the battered survivors as they charged at the enormous target, the Imugi. We can't just stand here and watch a live-action leveling nightmare unfold, someone yelled, and that single cry pulled the rest of them forward. The battlefield turned into a merciless grinder of flesh, steel, screams, and shattered stone. Monsters and soldiers crashed into one another in a frenzy as the fight swallowed everything nearby. A total of 4,119 cursed souls of Tepus fought side by side with the adventurers of Arcana. In that impossible moment, the dead and the living stood together against the monster that had ruined them all. Then the number dropped again. Only 2,847 remained. The toll of the battle kept rising, and each update made the scene feel more desperate than the last. Suddenly, a voice rose from the abyss itself and whispered to the one who carried the deepest darkness. It was ancient, solemn, and heavy with the weight of countless lost lives. Answer the call of their pride, savior of Tepus. Granfell Claudi Arpius Romeo's eyes snapped open sharply as that ancient will continued, its intent unmistakable. I entrust all my power to you. I accept your burden. The reply came without hesitation, firm and absolute, like a vow made on behalf of both the living and the dead. In the very next instant, a torrent of absolute darkness erupted and swallowed Imugi whole, tearing across its scales like a force meant to erase it from existence. The exhausted players could only stare in trembling disbelief, too overwhelmed to even understand the monstrous sight unfolding before their eyes. What kind of skill was that supposed to be? Someone whispered in stunned disbelief. That goes beyond logic. A radiant golden system window flashed open before everyone's eyes, bathing the battlefield in a brief, sacred glow. The colossal creature had fallen at last, yet Lee Hoyle remained standing without so much as a scratch on him, as though the entire nightmare had failed to even touch him. Then the next shock arrived. A world quest had been triggered. The system message appeared with unmistakable weight. World Quest, Dragon Slayer. The words alone were enough to make people hold their breath. The legend of the Zero Mountains calls to the one who hunts the dragon's kin. Clear notification. You have conquered the Tepus Labyrinth Rift. The survivors stared at the message in a daze, barely able to believe that they were still alive to see it. For many of them, it felt less like victory and more like a miracle. I really thought the darkness was going to swallow every last one of us, someone murmured, the words heavy with relief and lingering fear. Even after the battle ended, the terror of it still clung to their voices. Did he really just solo a dragon? Another asked, unable to process the scene no matter how many times they replayed it in their head. Saying it out loud only made it feel more unreal. Ignoring the shaken whispers spreading around him, Granfell Claudi Arpius Romeo turned away and walked toward a more secluded corner of the battlefield. His steps were elegant and unhurried, carrying the calm dignity of someone who had already moved on from a victory others would never forget. As he came to a stop, a fresh prompt appeared in front of him, silent and waiting for his next command. The system seemed almost respectful now, as though it understood this moment carried more than simple rewards. Only one cursed contractor remained out of the original 10,890 souls. After everything that had happened, that number felt almost unbearably heavy, a final fragment left behind from a sacrifice too cruel to put into words. Grandfell Claudi Arpius Romeo spoke with solemn grace, his voice low and steady. The world now knows of Tepus's noble sacrifice. There was no mockery in those words, only acknowledgement and the quiet respect owed to the dead. You may finally rest in peace. Tears slipped from the spirit's eyes at those words, and it answered softly, I understand. Around them, the surrounding players lowered their heads one by one, offering silent prayers for the soul's release and for the countless others who had perished with it. As the last spirit dissolved into light and vanished, Grandfell's entire demeanor shifted in an instant. The softness of farewell disappeared completely, replaced by something colder and far more dangerous. Now then, his gaze sharpened like a drawn blade as it swept through the crowd and locked onto a hidden presence. You there? The simple words carried enough pressure to make the air itself feel tight. I believe you have been looking for me. The unseen observer stiffened immediately, freezing in place as raw fear shot through him. Being noticed at all had already shattered his confidence. How? The hidden demon thought in panic. I concealed my demonic energy perfectly. That certainty had been one of the few things keeping him calm, until this moment. How could a human detect me? He had only come here to sneer at the human rumored to have slain a demon king, convinced the story had to be exaggerated. He had expected a fraud, or at worst a dangerous upstart. Not this. I thought he was just a lucky brat. I was planning to take his body once he was weakened, but the truth in front of him was far worse. This monster just butchered something dragon class like it was nothing. Every bit of his original arrogance was gone now. What is he? The demon thought, horrified. That isn't just magic. Whatever Li Hoyol possessed felt like a force that sat outside normal categories entirely. It's a darkness deeper than the abyss itself. The realization struck him with the cold certainty of instinct, and that instinct screamed only one thing: run. I'm a high-ranking demon, and I'm trembling. The thought humiliated him, but terror overpowered pride. He turned at once and tried to flee in blind panic, abandoning every shred of composure. The nearby players gasped when they saw him appear. Is that another monster? They cried out, startled all over again by a threat they had not even realized was there until now. If I don't run now, I'm going to be erased, the demon realized. But before he could get far, Grandfell Claudi Arpius Romeo appeared directly in his path like a grim reaper stepping out of nowhere, cutting off all escape in a single instant. A system message appeared, cold and absolute, sealing the demon's fate before he could resist it. The map of forgotten names demands a sacrifice. The words fell like a sentence already decided. The demon let out a raw, desperate scream as the ritual began around him. Panic twisted his face, and for the first time, he understood with perfect clarity that there would be no loophole and no mercy. Skill activated, exorcism ritual. Get away from me, the demon shrieked, thrashing wildly as the power took hold. But his fear only made the scene feel more final, as though he were already being dragged beyond the point of return. Meanwhile, far away at the AA Guild headquarters, a completely different kind of tension had settled over the room. The atmosphere there was thick with urgency as officials gathered to make sense of the impossible news coming out of the rift. Apologies for the delay. The emergency meeting of the 7 branch managers will now begin. Let us discuss the anomaly observed in the rift. The formal opening did little to hide the strain in the speaker's voice. Everyone present knew this was no routine meeting. The scale, the structure, the mana density, every indicator points to the same conclusion. Even the game designers have acknowledged it. But the Dragon Lord is still supposed to be dormant atop the Zero Mountains. So why would anything like that appear inside a low-level dungeon? The question hung over the room like a storm cloud. The Korean branch manager slowly adjusted his glasses before speaking. I do not believe what appeared there was a true dragon. His tone was careful, but firm, as though he had already thought through the implications. In the East, there is an old legend, he continued, about a serpent that failed to ascend. The room quieted even further as everyone listened. We call such a being the Imugi. The name itself carried a strange weight, and once spoken, it seemed to make the event feel both more understandable and somehow even more unsettling. So your conclusion is that what we saw was merely a degraded form, a failed evolution rather than a true dragon? One of the managers asked, trying to pin the theory down into something manageable. Precisely, came the reply. It is a variant existing outside the original code, but the threat level remains catastrophic. Arcana can no longer be treated as just a game. That statement settled heavily across the entire room, because everyone there knew it was true. The secrets of the Zero Mountains are the key, they concluded as they continued reviewing the data retrieved from the Tepus Labyrinth raid. Every piece of evidence seemed to point towards something much larger, still waiting in the shadows. Before long, a rough consensus was reached among the major global powers. Then the breaking news exploded across the internet like wildfire. Did everyone in that raid really receive a world-class quest? People asked in disbelief, unable to talk about anything else. It's confirmed, Lee Hoyle triggered it. The statement spread everywhere within minutes. This isn't just another flashy leveling recap anymore. This is history unfolding in real time. The scale of the moment had already grown beyond ordinary hype. Quest, Traces of the Dragon. A frantic reporter nodded as they relayed the update. Yes, every surviving participant reported receiving the same quest window. Elsewhere, Nam Taemin ground his teeth in frustration. Damn it, the bitterness in his voice was impossible to miss. I should have been there, Nam Taemin muttered, furious at the missed opportunity. Beside him, a rival lurking in the shadows whispered coldly, "While you complain, I'll surpass you." At the Gong Guild, Locke stared down at his phone with disbelief written all over his face. A dragon? Are you serious? Locke muttered. If this is true, that hidden class maniac, the Dragon Knight, is definitely going to make a move. Even he could tell that the balance of power was about to start shifting fast. Things are about to get ugly, he said under his breath. It wasn't excitement in his voice this time. It was the uneasy certainty that the entire situation was about to spiral into something much bigger. All across the industry, analysts were left completely baffled. The more they examined the reports, the less the event fit into any normal framework they understood. Lee Hoyle soloed a level 900 boss, but instead of monopolizing the rewards, he opened the way for everyone else, one analyst said in disbelief. At this point, he's basically carrying the entire player base on his back. It sounded absurd, but no one could deny the evidence. I'll say it plainly, another commentator declared. Player Lee Hoyle has become a lighthouse in our dark world. The comparison might have sounded dramatic in any other context, but now it felt painfully accurate. A lone brilliance piercing through the infinite abyss. Those words spread quickly, and soon netizens flooded the forums with praise, theories, and outright worship. One post after another repeated the same sentiment. He's the real protagonist. I only cleared the rift because of his route. Wait, but what actually happened inside? No comment. That became the general response from survivors who were too overwhelmed to explain the full horror of it. Meanwhile, talk of Traces of the Dragon swept through the community like wildfire, a single bright thread of meaning in the drought of worthwhile quests. Rumors about the hidden Dragon Knight class spun through article after article. And while Go Inazuma Burke returned to the joint training session, staring at his own avatar on the news beside Granfell Claudie Arpius Romeo's image plastered across every breaking headline, Lee Hoyle himself trembled uncontrollably. Stop, his inner voice screamed. Please, just stop. He was already dying from secondhand embarrassment. Wasn't the endless void of the universe dramatic enough? Did it really have to become this too? Now the world was calling him a lone beacon shining in the middle of total darkness. Lee Hoyle rolled around in pure agony, mentally collapsing under the humiliation. How was he ever supposed to show his face in public again after getting wrapped up in titles like this? But then a cold voice cut straight through his spiraling thoughts. The opinions of others are irrelevant. Lee Hoyle snapped back to himself immediately. That was right. What truly mattered was the system window in front of him. At that exact moment, a genuine world quest manifested, and a new notification flashed before his eyes. World Quest, Dragon Slayer. The legend of the Dragon Mountain calls out to the one who vanquished the evil dragon. You must set foot upon the peak of the Zero Mountains. From what he could tell, other players had only received the traces of the Dragon Quest. That much was obvious now. There was no denying it. He had unlocked the Dragon Slayer quest solely because his damage contribution had been on another level entirely. And when he looked back on the lessons left behind by the Dragon Demon War, the conclusion was clear. The devastation that kind of creature could unleash was not simply dangerous. It was catastrophic on a scale that could ruin everything. Even a power as absolute as the Great Magic Tower could not hope to stand against an immortal being like a dragon. In every practical sense, dragons were the final nightmare, the kind of existence that marked the true endgame. As far as Lee Hoyle understood it, the Zero Mountains, the lair where dragons nested, rose over Anna like a monstrous skyscraper touching the heavens. For ordinary players, even dreaming of setting foot in that place was ridiculous. The thought alone made terror spread across his face. Just picturing it was enough to make his head spin. If the creature he faced in Tun had been a real dragon, then he would not have merely lost the fight. He would have been erased without a trace long ago. If even the magic tower could not bring down a dragon, then how in the world was he supposed to fight one? The only reason he had managed to take down that level 900 brood in the first place was because his natural enemy skill had activated at exactly the right moment. Without that, victory would have been impossible. It really had been nothing short of a miracle. Because of that, Lee Hoyle forced himself to stay calm and get his breathing under control. No matter what, panicking would not help now. It was time to settle down and inspect the loot properly. The reward he obtained was the Fong of the Earth Dragon. Rarity, unique. Required level, 800. Effect, none. A sword forged from the Fong of an Earth Dragon, a weapon said to hold incomparable destructive power, the kind of raw force that could crush almost anything in its path. Lee Hoyle let out a tired groan. Oh, come on, another level restriction. Still, a weapon like this had to be absurdly powerful. Maybe I should at least try holding it for a second. But the instant his hand touched it, the system coldly threw reality in his face. Your level is too low to equip this item. Seeing Lee Hoyle sulking in frustration, Granfell spoke in his usual cold, sharp tone. What matters is not whether you can simply hold it, but how you choose to make use of it. Lee Hoyle sighed to himself, feeling the sting of that comment. How am I supposed to make use of something I can barely even lift? In the end, he forced himself to let the sword go and turned his attention elsewhere. Forget the sword. The map of all things. That was the real treasure, the one that felt as though it had dropped straight from the heavens into his hands. According to the system notification, the map of all things was an epic rank item with a level requirement of 0, which already made it sound far more practical than the Dragon Fawn. The map revealed the locations of hidden, lost, or deliberately concealed items. On top of that, it allowed the user to teleport to one of those places exactly once. The catch was brutal, though. The moment the teleportation function was used, every other effect would vanish on the spot. Even so, a grin spread inside his mind. So that means I can search for rare herbs, hidden artifacts, or basically any item I want. What should I look for first? Lee Hoyle carefully considered his options. He had already gained quite a lot while clearing the maze, including a full 15 level-ups, so he now had more room to think strategically than before. The stat menu offered strength, agility, magic, and luck. At first, the answer seemed obvious. I should probably dump all of my points straight into magic. But after staring at it for a while, he made one small, quiet decision of his own. I'll put exactly 1 point into luck. A burst of excitement rose in Lee Hoyle's chest the moment he made the choice. Lucky number 7. That actually looks pretty nice, doesn't it? Just seeing the number felt strangely satisfying, enough to make him smile for a second. Oh, fortune. Oh, great treasure map. Please lead me to some top-tier loot. After making his selection, he felt genuinely fired up. This was the kind of thrill that came with leveling in a mana-driven world, simple but addictive. Done. Now back to work. While he had been away, far too many exploration applications had piled up waiting for him. But the moment Granfell's eyes landed on one particular file, his entire expression froze. In a room heavy with gloom, where the air itself felt dim and drained of life, something about that document immediately stood out. Marcello stared down at his own palm, his face pale and drained of color. He was clearly panicking, though he tried not to show it too openly, and when he finally spoke, his voice trembled with barely restrained anxiety. Oh my, it seems he truly does not have much time left. The magic orb spoke in a tone meant to soothe him. Still, the magic tower will be all right. Archmage Lee Hoyle is doing an excellent job already. He will carry on the research we once pursued together. The orb continued praising him without hesitation. To be honest, my first impression of him was quite surprising, far more than I expected. Archmage Marcello, even the detection spell he cast just now was flawless. There was not a single wasted motion in it, not one unnecessary movement. What do you think? The orb pressed gently, as if trying to encourage him. Now that he is here, surely you can finally rest easy. But even then, Marcello could not completely let go. A faint hesitation still lingered deep inside him, stubborn and unresolved. There is only one thing, he admitted at last. To leave this world without seeing the Tower Master one last time, that is the one regret that still remains with me. His voice was calm, but the sadness underneath it was impossible to miss. Out in the hallway, Sai looked startled when she saw Li Hoyle striding toward her at a speed that clearly meant something was wrong. His face was set, and his pace was far too urgent to ignore. She greeted him warmly out of habit. "Greetings, Archmage Li Hoyle." But he rushed right past her without even slowing down. Watching him disappear down the corridor, Sai could only stare after him in confusion. Where is he hurrying off to like that? Rumors had long circulated that Archmage Marcello Simuard was suffering from a terminal illness, one tied to the cursed bloodline inherited by his family. Li Hoyle's thoughts sharpened at once. Is he trying to research a way to break that curse? The exploration application had stated it clearly. The target was Archmage Marcello, along with the hereditary curse of the Simuard mage family, who were currently searching desperately for a cure. His eyes narrowed with suspicion. So which is it exactly? He questioned under his breath. A terminal illness or a curse? This was clearly no ordinary curse. In the next instant, Li Hoyle received a quest notification. A plea from the Simuard family. The very name of it made the situation feel heavier. The Simuard mage family sought to trace the true origin of the hereditary curse that had haunted their bloodline for generations. The letter from the family was complete, and the quest to meet the Countess of the Simuard family had now officially begun. One line stood out more than anything else. This request originated from demons. Based on that information, he reached a grim conclusion. The ones behind all of this were demons. In that moment, the tension in this mana recap rose sharply. Through Granfell's presence, his eyes turned cold and hard with unmistakable resolve. The instant he realized they had dared to lay their hands on the magic tower once again, the air around him seemed to tighten. I will make them regret it. The grand estate standing behind the family grounds carried an overwhelming sense of majesty, as though the very building itself represented the immense authority and magical prestige of the Simuard family. Every member of that household was born with extraordinary magical ability. They were famous everywhere as a noble family of mages, renowned for producing one gifted genius after another. Yet despite all that brilliance and status, hardly anyone looked at them with envy. The ancient mansion still stood in solemn silence because the Simuard bloodline, though blessed with exceptional talent from birth, was also bound by a life-stealing curse that claimed them before they could even reach middle age. A sorrowful young boy stood there without saying a word, as if silence itself had become the only natural response left to him. For the Simuard family, death was not some distant fear but a familiar event, something they had witnessed so often it had become part of daily life. Even the light spilling into the room felt dim and lifeless, as though it too understood the grief hanging over the house. Marcello spoke in a soft, steady voice, one that sounded almost too calm for the moment. It seems everything is nearly ready now. He sat there quietly for a long time, thinking. Then, after that long silence, he murmured, I can feel it.